In the know, non-stop Vikings talk. It's Purple Daily on Score North and ScoreNorth.com.
Purple Daily on draft coming at you on a Tuesday because of the holiday weekend yesterday. So Purple Daily on draft ready to roll with Tyler Forness, Miles Gorham. We're finally here, fellas. NFL football season is upon us. We're a week into the college football season too. We're really excited to get the football season going here on both sides, professional and obviously collegiately as well. We're really excited to break down all of these topics right here on Purple Daily on Draft. We've been kind of leaving things up for the last 3 to 4 months. Now it's actually here. We get to break things down in the flesh, essentially. So we have a nice little show. We're actually going to start with the college football scene later on. We'll talk about some rookies and second-year players, maybe for the Vikings as well, expectations against the Buccaneers as Week 1 kicks off this Sunday at US Bank Stadium. Again, football's finally here. I'm jacked, and I'm really excited to talk some college football after an entertaining weekend last weekend in the college football ranks. So, Forno, I know this is your wheelhouse. I'm guessing you had all 4 of the TVs. Is it 4 TVs in the man cave downstairs?
It's a 65 OLED, 255 4Ks, and then I'm usually rocking my tablet and or my laptop. When you do what I do, when you do a lot of prognosticating, and our old buddy Thor can attest to this, you got to keep your eyes on a lot of games. You're watching one diligently, but it's kind of like being at a B-dubs where you always have your eyes on multiple screens to kind of keep tabs of what's going on. And it helps you kind of get a better sense than just, reading a box score or reading columns. You can still gain context from that, but being able to see things happen in real time, even if you're not putting all your attention on it, still makes a big difference in being able to understand the landscape of college football.
So the B-dubs commercials shouldn't even be B-dubs anymore. It should be Forno's basement, essentially. Like, that's the real true setup of the best football fan experience.
I can tell you, I have a better bourbon selection than B-dubs, and I would know. I've managed the B-dubs for the better part of 5 years. So it's I've got about, I want to say like 20, 25 different bourbons, including one that I won from my producer on the Real Forno Show, Dave. It's a nice little local one that's got a Viking on it, which is always a fun adage.
And if B-dubs or any of those sponsors want to sponsor Purple Daily on Draft, we will make that happen. We can gladly endorse anyone you want there. All right, fellas, let's start here. So Forno, you were telling us off mic, you're kind of starting this, essentially you did a skull searching a little bit series on Vikings Wire, and now you're taking a little bit of the similar idea. You're putting it with the college football quarterbacks. And if Kirk Cousins is indeed not on the Vikings roster by the time the draft rolls around, well, it's pretty early at the writings on the wall that the Vikings will be looking to draft a quarterback. So let's just start here on the college football landscape, I guess. Give me a few names that really intrigued you from just watching all these guys, but also how it maybe relates to them landing in purple by next year.
Absolutely. So the way we're approaching it at Vikings Wire is by looking at 12 names that we really believe can be in that category. And then as players emerge, we'll start talking about them like on a week-by-week basis. And then if they put up enough performances, we're going to talk about them every single week. Kevin Fielder's kind of spearheading that. We are now working on building up fans' knowledge of these guys. So when we go into the draft process, it's going to be, okay, I already know a good amount about Joe Milton, about Shedeur Sanders, about Austin Reed, who you're going to hear me talk a lot about because I'm very high on him. He's Bailey Zappi with juice in his arm. And in today's day and age where you're seeing a lot more air raid concepts, it is something that you can work with. But it's like you said, it's not a guarantee that Kirk Cousins is back next year. It's also not a guarantee that he's gone completely. We just have a major flux right now at the quarterback position. So we're going to do everything we can to educate on who could be the next guy. That's why I've written so many articles on Jaren Hall and breaking down his film. It's like, okay, what is he? And it's just too lazy by some to, hey, he performed bad. Well, why? Like within the context of each play, was it actually bad? And the answer was no. And he improved every single game. And the interception against the Cardinals wasn't even his fault because Ben Sims went too far on a stick route and hauled through it where it needed to be, and it was picked. Like, that's not on Hall. It's on the tight end for having to make sure that he gets the proper depth and is in the proper spot, because that's important, and especially if you're going to throw that with timing. So our goal is just to educate. And you can make your own decisions based on what information you're fine, but we are going to give you our best guess as to what it is. And that's what we're doing on this show here. We have to start talking about Shedeur Sanders. So if you did not watch Colorado TCU, what a hell of an opener that was to a fantastic week 1 of college football. Like, I watched some pretty nitty gritty games. I watched Texas State upset Baylor, which I did call in my ATS column last week. And I watched UTEP and Incarnate Word. Like, there was some great lower level college football, but Colorado TCU was the game of the day. And it really wasn't that close because you had Deion Sanders, Coach Prime, taking 87 new players into a downtrodden Colorado program. This is a program that won a national title in 1990, and they won a Big 12 title as recently, I believe it was 2002, when they beat Nebraska 62-35, and I think that ended Frank Solich's tenure there. But when you look at everything and the whole package, Sanders has the athleticism, he has the arm talent, he has the escapability, he has the accuracy. The one real question was, how is he going to translate from the FCS to the FBS? Because it's a huge jump in football. And it's not necessarily a criticism of him, but you just had to see it and you had to understand what that would look like. Cam Ward went from FCS Incarnate Word to Washington State. His first 6 weeks were really rough because he experienced a more difficult transition. And now you saw him against Colorado State, and he looked fantastic. He looked a lot more comfortable. He looked more cohesive. That offense brought over from Western Kentucky by Ben Arbuckle's working great. But we had to see that with Sanders. And we saw it in droves. He looked the part. And it was a 4-star recruit coming out of college. Obviously, he went to go play for his dad. Who can blame him? His dad is Deion Sanders. It's not like he's going to my dad. I love my dad. He's a fantastic blue-collar guy, but I wouldn't want my dad coaching me at the college level in football. So when you look at all those things and how he navigated with an offensive line that was pretty much all transfers, 2 South Florida guys, Jimmy Horn Jr. and Xavier Weaver, and then Travis Hunter, the ultimate Ironman. He cannot do this full time. You can't ask him to play 150 snaps a game. But if he does the true Deion role, 20, 25 snaps on offense, full-time corner, this guy could be the number 1 overall pick in 2 years because he's not eligible till the 2025 draft. Some of the things he was doing was incredible. That interception where the running back was running a rail route and he just jumps it, absolutely nuts stuff. But Sanders, 510 yards, 4 touchdowns, no turnovers against the national runner-ups last year. On the road, first game, incredible. And watching some of the All-22, you can see how he's maneuvering, how he's making really quick decisions, how he's creating outside of structure because the offensive line breaks down, because that's where Colorado's the weakest right now. Then they just don't have the depth there yet. 2 years they will. Right now they don't. And it's hyperbolic to say right now, and I mentioned this to you pre-show, this quarterback class is completely undecided right now, but it has the potential to have the depth of talent that we saw in 83, 99, 2018. We just don't know what this quarterback class is going to be because there's like 12 guys who could theoretically go in the first round if they have a really successful season. And Sanders is now at the top of that bunch with how well he played and how consistent and decisive he was with his decision-making. It was one of the more impressive debuts in the FBS I've seen in a long, long time. And Colorado is here to play.
Yeah, 510 yards, a school record for Colorado versus Shedur Sanders in week 1 against TCU. He already has pretty impressive numbers coming in from Jackson State. To Forno's credit, he's still going to have to play a little bit more college football. But Miles, anyone else did you notice from the college football side of things watching that might be interested or the Vikings could be interested in come draft time next year?
Yeah, I got 2 guys that I think just at least they excite me going in. The first guy is Michael Pennix Jr. from Washington. So he was obviously at Indiana first. He's a lefty like me, so I kind of, me and him got a lot in common. But I think with some mechanic updates and things like that, like the guy's got a big arm. The way he was able to stand in the pocket and find guys downfield all day on Saturday was impressive. But I think with some refinement to his mechanics, I think he could use a little bit more of his lower body. He uses a lot of arm more than his full body. I think with some of those mechanic adjustments, I think he could be a good prospect. He's a little on the older side just because of that, the COVID year and things like that. But I think he's the kind of guy that you could look at as like the back end of a first round, early second round type of quarterback in this draft and the upcoming draft. And then the other one for me that going into this season, my quarterback 3 was JJ McCarthy from Michigan. Now he had a lot to prove, but I think there's a lot of upside there. And I think on Saturday when they played Eastern Carolina, he really did a good job of looking a little bit more poised in the pocket, less panicky. He looked like he had a lot more control than we saw last year. So I'm just excited to see how he builds off of it. But he could be the type of quarterback that I think Kevin O'Connell's really looking for, a guy that maneuvers in the pocket and has a good arm, and he's accurate. And I think those are important traits for Kevin O'Connell. And if he can continue to build on it, I think he could be a guy at 21 years old, or going to be 21 years old, draft eligible, that you want to build around.
Yeah, I watched some of the Michigan game as well on Saturday, and it was obviously a butt kicking. But he was someone that we brought up on this show before, Miles, that before you kind of entered the frame here last month. But Forno, I was pretty impressed with what I saw, and in general, he has probably a lot of stock to build. Miles brings up a good point that he might be one of those first, 2 or 3 quarterbacks off the radar, or off the draft board, I should say. What did you particularly like from JJ McCarthy, at least in the first game of the college football season?
So when I look at prospects, I look at them in 2 ways. One, I look at them as far as an overall picture and like how I would rate them. And then I have a separate category where I just have guys who are my favorite prospects. Everybody has that. And those guys end up making the All-4-0 team at the end of the year. Well, McCarthy so far is my favorite prospect. He is my favorite prospect in this draft class. And what I really liked against East Carolina is some of the manipulation, where he threw a corner out on a smash concept where they had a safety over the top, and then they had the corner playing your basic cover 2 where he's got the high-low. Well, what he did was he ended up throwing the corner and threw a perfect ball, but he just did a little bit of a shoulder fake before he ended up layering it over the top. And that little fake manipulated the corner enough so he could layer it without having any contention from the corner. That kind of stuff is impressive. Creating his own throwing lanes when he needs to just evade pressure. He is so savvy at those things. And this is only his second year as a starter. Last year, he didn't even start every game, because it was him and Cade McNamara. They each started one of the first 2 games, and that was how they finished the quarterback competition. He ended up winning that job as a former 5-star, which he should have, but he doesn't have incredible zip on the ball. His arm is reminiscent of Kirk Cousins in the fact that it is more than capable. It is not elite. And with that true dual threat, and he's got legit wheels and how he maneuvers in and out of the pocket, I really like him. I will say about Pennix, the injuries scare the hell out of me. Multiple ACL tears, a left shoulder injury that ended a season at Indiana as well. Look, the guy's awesome. And what he was able to do at Washington last year in that system basically went from a runner as a quarterback with the ability to sling it to a true pocket passer. Was a really, really impressive transition under Kalen DeBoer and offensive coordinator Ryan Grubb. But I don't know what the medicals look like. And to me, that's scary. And it's something that needs to be talked about. Before we move on, I want to mention one guy, Joe Milton. Joe Milton is bad. And I call him a driving range quarterback, where you have guys who go to the driving range and they could smash a ball 350, 400 yards. But they can't do anything in the intermediate and short game. And that's kind of what Joe Milton is. He's going to wow you. It's like, whoa, he can do that. The dude threw from the 20 to the opposing 25-yard line with the flick of the wrist, opposite hash. No problem. He's thrown on film 90 yards before. The problem is he struggles at reading defenses. He struggles at placing the ball properly in the short range. He's not too dissimilar to Hendon Hooker. Hooker was really poor in the short games. He could make the right reads where they're basically handed to him on a silver platter by Josh Heupel, but he's throwing low, he's throwing high, he's throwing left or right. It's like he has a target like this big, and he's hitting every ounce of that circumference instead of actually hitting the target. And that's where what we see with Kirk Cousins is he's hitting the hands where they're supposed to be, or he's getting it a lot closer and they don't have to like reach way back or reach way up to go get these footballs. Milton cannot do that. And he hasn't been able to do it his whole career. He won the starting job at Michigan in 2020 and Tennessee 2021, lost them both because he stunk. And he's got a 5-star freshman, Nico Amalieva. I think I butchered that name, but the dude is fantastic. He got some playing time against Virginia this weekend. Milton might not last the season. And there are people who will be fooled because he could just make these beautiful deep throws. He unfortunately can't do anything else with any form of consistency. And unless he decides to just do a complete 180, I want nothing to do with Joe Milton at the next level.
Really excited here. In just a couple weeks, the Gophers are going to host UNC. We're going to see Drake May. I know there's not a lot of our Purple Daily audience, which is nationwide. I would actually wager that more than probably half of those Vikings fans are actually not Gopher football fans, but obviously for the ones locally here in the state, Drake May, who's one of the most intriguing college football quarterback prospects going into the draft next year, is definitely going to be under the watchful eye of probably all three of us here in a couple of weeks when they play UNC. Really, really excited to see what the Gophers could go against in Drake May.
He's my quarterback one. I have him above Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams is interesting because he wows everybody. He basically tries to make SportsCenter's top 10 every single play, and he's really good at it. That type of success will translate to the NFL, not nearly at the level as it does in college, because you're playing like the best corner you'll see all year will be like the 30th best corner in the league. And that's kind of the transition that he's going to have to make. Patrick Mahomes made that transition. There were a lot of the same questions I have about Caleb Williams that we had about Mahomes. Mahomes went to a phenomenal situation. If he goes to the Cardinals, I'm genuinely scared for Caleb Williams in the short term, because that coaching staff is pretty brutal, and the talent surrounding him is going to be the exact same. But Williams does not take enough of the easy layups that are right in front of him, and he tries to play on hard mode and make that SportsCenter top 10. To me, he needs to clean some of that up. And hey, there's a wide open slant for 10 to 20 yards. Dude, just take it. It's okay. Yeah, you can make all these incredible plays. You don't have to. And the sooner he can learn that, he will surpass Drake May for me. But right now, May's incredible. A lot of people compare him to Justin Herbert. He's got a very similar body type. He's 6'4", 220, has that lean frame, and he can create on the run. He has a beautiful deep ball. He's very accurate, and he's dynamic. He's got a very powerful arm where he can drive it to all areas of the field, including hitting that deep out opposite hash. I love how his consistency is. He can read a defense. He can go through his progressions, and he has no problem either creating for himself to make the big play or being able and willing to take that 10-yard gain and live to fight another down. I think May is the better prospect right now. I know I'm not alone in thinking that. And the NFL is going to be so split on these guys because while they're very similar, they're very different. And if you have a chance, go to TCF, go watch Drake May, because he is incredible and very fun to watch play the position. And the way these two end up fighting all season for that top quarterback spot is going to be a fascinating watch, because there's going to be a lot of people who call you dumb if you don't have Caleb Williams. But I challenge you to watch them both play in depth and make that choice for yourself. Because May, if you don't think he's above Williams, I think you'll agree that he's right there with him.
Yeah, he's going to be really, really fun to watch. Gophers will get a good chance to see him, obviously, here in a couple weeks. Boys, transitioning to week 1 against the Tampa Bay Bucks. Miles, are you looking at any of the rookie class, or I'll even throw in the second-year players? Are you kind of circling anyone right away that actually could make a big difference against a lowly team in Tampa Bay? It's a soft start, if you will, for the Vikings. Don't want to take them too lightly either. But are you looking at anyone or players that could make an immediate difference in week 1 from the last 2 draft classes?
Well, I mean, I think it's obviously the trenches. The biggest thing the Vikings have is their issues with the trenches, and the one thing that the Bucks have in droves is a defensive line. They have a stout defensive line, obviously with Vita Vea being one of the better nose tackles in the game, and then they just drafted Kalijah Cansey, and then Joe. I always butcher his name, so I want to apologize for that. Let me read it off one more time. Joe Tryon Shoyinka. So he's their edge rusher. He hasn't really ascended yet, but playing, maybe he's going up against Brian O'Neill, who was injured, the last half of last year, and and kind of ramping up late into the training camp this year. So I'm kind of, that the trenches. Ed Ingram is definitely that guy for me. That Ed Reed and that true interior. So Ed Ingram. I keep saying Ed Reed. Excuse me. I got him on my mind. I guess they're talking Hall of Fame and everything the other day. But yeah. So I think Ed Ingram is one of those guys that you want to make sure he can prove that he stepped up and he's kind of improved in year two. But I'll obviously say too, like I think that Bucs defense is no slouch. And I don't want to sit there and act like they don't have talent across all three levels of that defense. They do. And I think, if you can get Jordan Addison involved early on, he could be that mismatch because we know all the attention is going to go to Justin Jefferson and probably TJ Hawkinson right behind that. And so they need that third guy to step up. KJ Osborne, Jordan Addison. I don't know how much Addison's going to play, but Addison really has an opportunity to really show himself early in this process because teams are going to be so focused on Jefferson that, they're going to be more one-on-one matchups. And I don't know if guys like Jamel Dean can stick with his quickness and those things, because I don't know if Carlton Davis will travel with JJ or not, but I can guarantee you that they're going to probably bracket coverage JJL games. So how do you move those guys around? But I think Addison has a chance to be that impact, have an impact. And then maybe on the defensive side, I would say, obviously the corners. Those are, I think Mike Evans and Chris Godwin are arguably the best, not the best, but one of the better duos in the league right now. And they're being underrated because they lost Tom Brady and they have Baker Mayfield. And I'm not saying Baker Mayfield's going to light the Vikings up, but I don't know. We don't know if the Vikings can stop anybody yet. They coming out of last year, they couldn't, and they didn't really do a lot to truly improve the defensive backs besides really having Brian Flores. So we'll see if those guys can really step up and, Mekhi Blackman and Caleb Evans, if those guys can really show that they've developed in this offseason against those two guys.
Yeah, it'll be interesting because they're 6-point favorites right now. The Vikings are against the Bucs, so they're definitely more of a heavier favorite, and we'll see if the Vikings maybe cover that spread. But they're certainly favored at home. Tampa Bay could be in line for even the top pick in the draft. We'll see how it develops, and you don't want to take them too lightly, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Forno, I guess, what rookies do you think, or second-year players, could make a big difference right away Week 1 at US Bank Stadium against the Bucs?
That's an interesting question. I think the two that I jumped to right away are Ed Ingram and Lewis Cine, and it could be either positive or negative. We genuinely just don't know. I think Ingram is going to have a much better season because there's going to be more continuity in the offensive line. He has a full year to learn how he needs to fix things, and this first preseason game was fine. Some of the things he was being blamed for weren't really his fault, and being able to have starting caliber players on either side of him is going to make a big difference in how he plays regardless. But he still allowed 63 pressures on 1,225 snaps last year. It was far and away the most in the NFL. He did have the 6th most snaps from an interior offensive lineman. So that needs to be taken into context as well. One of my bold predictions that I just released for the Vikings wire is I think he might be able to cut that in half because of how O'Connell's going to run this offense. And they're going to do a lot more of the Shanahan stuff we've traditionally seen with this Vikings team. A lot of boot action, a lot of sliding of these offensive linemen and being able to help each other out. Plus with Josh Oliver being utilized as an extra blocker at times, that's going to allow guys like O'Neal and Bradbury to go help. And being able to help Ingram is going to make such a big difference. Now, he could not improve at all. And that element is something that could end up costing the Vikings, which is why that impact could go either way. And it's kind of the same with Lewis Cine. We've talked a lot about Cine recently. He has all this potential. He has not shown it to this point. And a lot of the issues with him stem from his tackling, and he tackles way too high. And then that second preseason game, he basically went way too low, and he got jumped over by Tyjae Spears on that 33-yard touchdown. How is he going to be able to put it all together when he does get on the field? How is that going to impact the defense? Is he going to keep making mistakes, or is he going to make plays? I think those two are going to be the biggest ones I'm going to be watching for, because I want to see how their development is in a real game situation in the regular season. How are they being utilized, especially Cine, because that back end of the defense is going to be used in such a versatile manner. So looking at what they do, I think is going to tell a lot about how this Vikings team is going to play long term at these positions and what their potential career arc is going to be.
If I said 5.5 defensive snaps for Lewis Seen on Sunday against the Bucs, Miles, would you take the over or would you take the under of 5.5 defensive snaps, not special teams?
And this is like blowout, like those types of things, right?
Yeah, it's just everything encompassing, whether it's a blowout or a close game.
I mean, I think if it's a close game, I'd go the under. I just don't think they're quite ready to put him out there in significant snaps. Now if somebody gets hurt, somebody gets banged up, those types of things, or needs a blow. But I just don't know if we're going to see much of him on defense yet. But I think as he progresses, we don't know how healthy he is yet too, because he was, he got hurt right before that third preseason game as well. But at the same time, if there's a blowout, he should get a lot of the snaps. But either way, I'd say the under. I'll go with under right now.
Forno, how about you?
I'm going to smash the over. I think it's easily plausible he plays 10 to 15 snaps. And when you look at a lot of these teams, they're running 67 to 75 snaps on average. So if you have 75 snaps, asking Seen to play like 10 to 15% of them is very plausible. And it's not crazy, especially considering how they're going to use a lot of 3 safety looks. And look, I like Josh Metellus. He's an incredibly smart dude, and he has busted his butt to get to this point. But it's undeniable that Seen has more talent than Josh Metellus, and he's a much more explosive athlete. And in some of these packages where they're going to be doing a lot of blitzing, where they're going to be super aggressive, you're going to want a projectile missile like Seen on the field. Now, will he be able to perform? We just don't know. There's two that you can't be too overly confident that he's going to be great or he's going to be bad, because the book is still out on him. We're still trying to learn what he is. And when you look at the whole picture, I think 10 to 15 snaps makes a lot of sense, especially with that blitz element, something we did not use at all last year. That Seen's going to be really, really good at.
Miles, you had Josh Metellus on the Climbing the Pocket podcast, I believe, correct?
Yeah.
So you've been able to talk to him a little bit. I guess, what have you kind of gathered just about how he carries himself, and also, I guess, in general, what are your kind of expectations for him in the Vikings defense this year?
Yeah, so he's telling us, before it got announced, he'd hit us up and said, I got to surprise you guys. He became, as the captain, he told us that, but then the news came out before we could record, which is totally fine. Really happy for him. But no, he's going to get a really good opportunity to play on that like star role in that defense where, they play more dime, more of those like, dime packages where there are multiple DBs on the field, less linebackers or less D linemen. And so I think he's really going to get a chance to play in the nickel and the slot a little bit more. But also, roll in this and play a linebacker role as well and kind of be in the box. And I think he's kind of got a good build for that. I worry a little bit, and we talked a little bit about it. I was like, I asked him if he could cover JJ 101. And so, of course, the confidence in him, he's going to say yes. But I do wonder how you'd handle working in the slot against some of these like upper tier, slot receivers. But at the same time, I think he has the instincts and the ability to read and understand offenses enough to where I think he could be a good fit in what they're trying to do. But to Tyler's point, I think, you would like eventually maybe that does become a Lewis Seen. But at the same time, I think Metellus has done a great job of earning that role and really come in and become a leader in that team, in that DB room. And I think he sounds really excited but confident that things are going to go well. And I have no reason to doubt him, because I think he's just put in that kind of work to do it.
Yeah, I'm curious to really watch him too. Judd's been kind of looking at him a lot in training camp, and him being a Swiss Army knife for Flores. So it's clear they really like him, at least to start here. We'll see how long of a leash he'll get. Forno, do you think Jordan Addison catches his first NFL touchdown in his first NFL game in Week 1 against the Buccaneers?
I see what you're doing here, Declan. I see it. The Vikings even came out and tweeted earlier this morning that this was like the new 3 deep. And I missed it this past Sunday, but they actually aired on Fox the entirety of Randy Moss's debut, where he ended up catching 2 touchdown passes against the Buccaneers, including that one where I had one of those little hologram gimmicks where like you move it and like it's like a changing picture of Moss's first touchdown when I was 8 years old. So I don't think he does. And I don't know how they're going to integrate him into this offense, because it's blatantly obvious that he's really good and he's ready. But I can't be convinced that he's higher in the depth chart than KJ Osborne. And I don't know how often they're going to utilize 3 wide receivers. I really don't. Or how they're going to integrate him in over Osborne, because Osborne has the trust of the entire team and coaching staff. He's worked incredibly hard, and he's played very well so far during the preseason and training camp. It's too hard to project out. Now, he could get a chance really early, and all of a sudden he is wide receiver 2 right out the gate. But to me, it's too much uncertainty, especially with all the weapons that we have. And touchdowns are inherently random. Like, Justin Jefferson only had 7 last year, and he was the most productive wide receiver in all of football. It's too difficult to predict touchdowns. Hell, when Calvin Johnson had that 1,964-yard season, he caught, I think, 3 or 4 and got tackled inside the 5 like 6 times. It's just so hard to predict that kind of thing. So if I have to, I'm going to go no.
Yeah, I think he'll make a pretty significant impact early just because he's not being targeted a ton. He's not being covered a ton. I mean, the intention's obviously on Jefferson and Hawkinson first, and how KJ Osborne and Jordan Addison, I guess, get in the mix is what the intriguing part is, because they're not the number 1 and 2 stars necessarily on this offense. So can Jordan Addison kind of slip through the cracks a little bit and become someone that does catch his first touchdown? And yeah, the Vikings haven't had really the 3 deep at this level in quite some time. So I'm totally down with getting 3 deep back. I mean, that was awesome. That's kind of like was my first taste as a Vikings fan. And it would be certainly sweet to see, the Vikings offense have a 3 deep type of situation in 2023. And then obviously going forward as well. Boys, before we wrap here, Miles, are you looking out for anyone else to make an impact for the Vikings this year? Or also, we should probably do this impromptu here. Give me a final score update too for Week 1 against the Bucs.
Yeah, I'll give you a name first. So Jaquelin Roy is someone I'm just interested to see, just because of how they cut the depth chart going into out of camp. He's going to have a chance to rotate in because they don't have a lot of guys, and I think he's a guy that looked, when he was healthy, looked pretty good in training camp. And the guys in front of him aren't world beaters. They're not guys that are like Kairos Tonga and Dean Lowry aren't expensive players. I think Harrison Phillips the best of the bunch, but those interior guys aren't like anything to write home about. And I think if Roy can come in and rotate and have a small impact early, I think he could show that maybe later on the season he could develop himself into a bigger role. So that's a guy that I'm just curious about and see if he might be able to make an impact this year. Score prediction, I will go 28-24 Vikings, but because it has to be a 1-score game. I don't think we could, it has to be at this point, just with the Kevin O'Connell Vikings regime. The last few years, it's ingrained in them now. So.
All right, I like it. I will say prediction from me will be, I'll say 28-13. I think the Vikings cover this spread. I think the Bucs can maybe march down the field a little bit here against a pretty raw and inexperienced defense, but in general, maybe the kiss of death as I say this, and they'll clip this for next week when the Vikings don't even come close to this happening. But I will stick to that one at least. Forno, how about you, man? Any last players you want to watch, and maybe a Week 1 score prediction, if you will?
I want to see what the cornerbacks are going to be like and how they're implemented in this defense and how often they're left on an island, because Brian Flores has traditionally liked to use a lot of these Bengal Hawk blitzes where you have 7 guys on the line of scrimmage and you drop 2 depending on how the protection shifts. And that's how Jay Ward ended up getting his sack against the Arizona Cardinals. So how is he going to use that? And how often they're going to ask these guys to really play on a traditional island? How do they respond? I think that's going to be something I'm going to watch really in depth and try to figure out, okay, how are they doing this, that, and the other thing? And how often are they being helped by either scheme or having somebody over the top? What are those nuances? And I'm going to actually pull out the history books. The Vikings from 1998 until 2014 didn't win a single game at Raymond James Stadium. And the first one that they won was the Anthony Barr-Scoopin score. 2002 and 2003, they lost 41-13 in both of those games. So that's going to be my score prediction, that to pull one out. I think Baker Mayfield's going to be better than people are giving him credit for. He shouldn't have played through that torn labrum in 2021 in his left shoulder, but he did because he wanted to compete. And I think it ended up costing him pretty much everything so far. But the way they like to play down in Tampa Bay, they like to be vertical. And Mayfield is really good at being vertical with some really good wide receiver talent. And I think that they're going to do that, and they're going to be able to do it pretty well. but I think the Vikings are going to get the win, and I don't think it'll be by one score.
Okay. Yeah, this will be a fun one. I mean, they will have the Philadelphia Eagles right away on Thursday Night Football right afterwards, too. So it's kind of imperative that they get this first win, play with house money a little bit. Otherwise, man, you could be 0-2 within 5 days, and that would not be a fun start to the Viking season, especially, too, with all the insane quarterbacks they do have to play early on in the year. Purple Daily on Draft. Once a week right here, usually on Mondays on the Purple Daily YouTube channel. Hit the subscribe button. We'll have more college football breakdowns for next week. We'll obviously be breaking down what happened in week 1. Hit the subscribe button for Daily Minnesota Vikings Entertainment, where we just want to see the Vikings win a Super Bowl before we die.